Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Yeah, second half, and the Celtics surge continues here. Rolling over the 76ers to begin their second half, Sherrod, but this is a stretch run. This is where they're going to peak. This is where they're going to push into the playoffs, try to secure their seeding. They got the Knicks on Sunday, so that'll help. And this one will help as well, just cruising through Philadelphia, even with Embiid active, even with Paul George in the game. This is a team they beat less than a month ago down there without those guys, and then they do it with those guys tonight. I'm starting to think Philadelphia is going to be an afterthought late this year, but we can get to them later in the show. The real story, Sherrod, I think, is that this is going to be a much less frustrating second half of the Celtics. It looks like they're getting serious, getting healthy, most importantly, and starting to ramp up toward that peak run into the playoffs we're talking about here.
Yeah, your second point, Bobby, is really, I think that the big one is that they're getting healthy. We've seen what this team can do when they are at full strength and health is not an issue. They're damn near unbeatable. If you talk about a best of 7 series. And that's really the lens from which I think you have to look at what they're doing going forward. They're going to have some hiccups along the way between now and the playoffs. There's no doubt about it. But if this team is able to maintain a high level of health more than anything else, it becomes very difficult to see them, coming up short in a best of 7 series.
Yeah, against anyone right now, even Cleveland after the upgrades they've made. New York hasn't been able to touch them. Philadelphia certainly has put up fights through some of these games, but tonight it felt like domination pretty early. Double-digit lead in that first quarter, held them at arm's length, and Philly wasn't playing poorly in this game. They were getting some good possessions, offensive rebounds, different ways to get by Celtics defenders. Maxi's always a problem in that sense. But the Celtics, the 8-12 3-point start, which is what we got to talk about here. They're heating up from 3 rapidly into the second half. They were third over the 10 games going into the break at about 37% from 3. Tonight, after that 8-12 start, they finish 24 of 54, 44% from 3. And when you do that, when they do that, especially, you're going to be maintaining double-digit leads and expanding on them, once you start getting stops into the second half. And that's where Philly really cooled down. The third quarter, they just went completely silent offensively, and this became a 20, 30-point game.
Yeah, and it became a 20, 30-point game pretty quick. And somewhat surprising, not because Philadelphia has all this talent, but the fact that they had their big 3, the fact that they were at home, the fact that even if they didn't win this game, which very few people thought they could, you expected them to put up a little bit more resistance. And it just seemed that the Celtics really from the outset just established their control of the game, doing the things that, frankly, reminded us of the Celtics team we saw last year, a team that could just absolutely have a 5, 6, 7, 8-minute stretch where they become the best team on the planet, and a relatively close game, not far from a blowout, all of a sudden becomes just absolute domination on the Celtics part. And we saw that. Philadelphia had no answers for the Celtics when they were just absolutely cooking from outside. And I know at some point we're going to talk about PDP, Payton Pritchard, who, again, another really starting off the second half of the season, really establishing and making a case for 6th man of the year. These are the kind of games that are going to only amplify those calls and, frankly, better position him for that individual honor. But make no mistake about it, the Celtics, this was an across-the-board, team-wide domination of Philadelphia. And to your point, Bobby, and we can talk about it later, Philadelphia is looking very much like a lottery team in every sense of the word. And the sad part for them is, depending on where they finish, they may not even get that pick. Which is something that myself and Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer talked about on our last episode of the Big 3 NBA podcast. He talked about just the scenarios where Philadelphia could basically play like crap the rest of the season and have a fairly high first-round pick, and they'd be conveyed to Oklahoma City.
I think that's what they have to do. And again, I don't want to lead this off with them because who cares at this point? They're just so back of mind at this point. It's crazy. They are who they are. You look at them, 15 games under 500. Guys in and out of the lineup, that's not conducive for success. Even when guys come back together into the lineup, they're losing games with those guys too. I saw on the broadcast that their record with the big three together isn't even that great either. It's better, obviously, than when those guys have been out. But it's not like they've been some budding contender when those guys have played together. And it's George especially, who's dealing with a finger injury. He's talked about, I think, a groin thing as well. And he looks like a shell of himself at this point. Embiid, it doesn't scare you too much. He's good. He's effective. But then he's out of the game again, 2 games later, can't play the back-to-backs. Will he survive into the postseason push here? And then he dropped the bombshell into the breaks, Sherrod, that he needs surgery to recover from this injury that's kept him off the floor all year. So at some point here, I do think they have to decide, and maybe the standings are going to do it for them the way they're playing. I think this was their 6th straight loss. Get Embiid that surgery, get George right for next year, let the young guys play, the Yabus of the world, let them develop, and call it a year. Go get that pick, top 6 protected, as you said, and don't delude yourself. Don't carry this delusion that you're going to make the playoffs here. They're not going to.
Yeah.
That's where I am with them on that point. They're not going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and the Celtics, this is a little bit of a tricky game to gauge because the Celtics played great, but then you have to look at it from the perspective of who they played. New York on the weekend will be a much more telling indicator of where they are right now coming out of the break, and whether, frankly, New York is one of maybe just 2, maybe 3 teams in the East that if you're the Celtics could stand in the way of you getting back to the finals. And you've been able to control those teams whenever you played them. So this game on Sunday, and again, we can talk about it later, but it's definitely a bigger game, I think, for the Knicks than the Celtics at this point. But this was just, there's so many different things that you can really lock in on this game. I mean, Tatum's triple-double, Payton Pritchard off the bench, Jrue Holiday, didn't have a great game, but certainly it was just good to see him back out there. Jaylen Brown, a quiet 20 points. Lots of guys stepped up and made the most of their opportunities in this game. And it was a reminder for a lot of people just how deep this Celtics team is. I mean, they don't have to have all of their top tier players playing at their best of their level to beat this, beat a team like Philadelphia, who had their best players on the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get into some of these performances individually. Tatum triple-double, 4th of his career, 2nd of the season. It feels low for him to have those few triple-doubles given some of the big games he's had. Pritchard out of this world, as you mentioned earlier, Sherrod. We'll definitely talk about him in full. Kornet, great again here too. You'd have to put him on the list. Another good game for Luke Kornet. He had the broadcast going crazy at certain points of this one. And Jaylen Brown, I thought, strong in this one, too. A fully healthy effort for the Celtics. For the most part, Xavier Tillman missed this game, but everyone else available. And hopefully they'll be able to keep that going into the stretch. Brown missed a couple games before the break. Holiday came back tonight after missing 4 straight going into the break. So we'll hit on all those guys and more. Noa's in Philly getting post-game quotes right now, so we'll have her on in a little bit. Some video from her too, I'm sure, down at the Wells Fargo Center. And we are brought to you by Prize Picks. All-Star weekends in the past, Sherrod. I got some stories from out there. We can talk about that a little bit, although I don't want to get into all the, how do you fix the game and this and that. Win up to 1,000 times your cash. You know the deal over on Prize Picks. All you do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks with over 10 million members and billions in awarded winnings. Best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states. Real money sports action. And again, millions of users. They got the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect. Double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And they put their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. 5 3-pointers for Curry. Now that he's back in action with the Warriors, playing alongside Butler there, you can go more or less on that alongside with more on Giannis's 35 points, all kinds of stuff like that, and you can do it with your friends. And they're always doing free squares and great offers over there as well. So go over there and use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup with code CLNS. Download the app today and run your game on Prize Picks. Let's start with Tatum, Sherrod. He was playing great going into the break, more so the scoring side of things. Tonight, Philly decided they were going to double him, crowd him, and we know the deal at this point that when teams do that, he's just going to start whipping the ball all over the place. I think Celtics assisted on 20 of their first 25 baskets in this game. They end with
incredible
33 of 43. So the Celtics assisted on nearly every basket they made in this game, and Tatum had 10 of them.
Yeah, and Tatum, I thought really set the tone for just being more of a facilitator and just really harnessing that playmaking that's in him, and frankly making the ball hop the way it needs to for the Celtics team to be, frankly, just it's another dimension of who they are. You look at them, and when you think about teams like the Celtics who have lots of good three-point shooters, you think that's pretty much all they're doing. But what I think often gets lost in the shuffle is the playmaking that sets up a lot of those shots, the ability to, frankly, break defenses down so that you can get in not just good looks at the basket, but great ones. And I thought they got a lot of really, really good looks in this game. And this was a very complete type of Celtics win that, for me, and I think for a lot of people, was reminiscent of what we saw on the road to last year's championship, where they would have a 5, 6, 7 minute stretch where they just absolutely play their asses off, and that would be enough to give them a pretty sizable cushion and buffer that they don't really relinquish. And this felt like a 20-point win. Actually, it felt like it should have been a little bit wider than that, but regardless, the Celtics are playing the kind of basketball that they need to play as they ratchet up towards the playoffs.
Yeah, and I like them empowering Tatum. I think that's the way they need to go more often this second half stretch here into the playoffs. Make him the ball handler. Let him absorb that pressure. Let him play for longer stretches. We talked a lot going into the break, Sherrod. They played him some massive, massive stretches in that Heat game specifically. I think he played 21 straight minutes in the second half. In that Knicks game, he played 15 straight with the game in doubt and slammed the door on them in the third quarter. And especially to start the third quarters, I feel like that's where he's been at his best. I feel like that's where he's generated some real momentum. And the best part about, I think, extending them through those stretches, and Joe just loves to play these guys into the fourth quarter. I mean, even tonight, it's like a 25-point game, and they're still out there, some of them in the fourth. If they can slam the door before the third quarter ends more often in the second half, I think you're going to get some more rest. I think you're going to be able to put games away that might be in doubt otherwise. And so they've balanced that Brown Tatum rotation thing all year, and I get that they want to prioritize Brown early in these games because that's where he's at his best, but in the third quarters, I think you have to start looking at playing Tatum 12 straight minutes out of halftime, or at least a longer stretch, just to get him going, just to help him build that rhythm. And even just talking to him a couple of times, it feels like that rhythm is important to him to be able to play more than 5-6 minutes without coming off the floor.
Yeah, and Tatum, again, that's not unusual for guys who are really good shooters. They're used to playing with a certain tempo, certain rhythm in terms of the shots they're getting, in terms of the volume of shots that they're getting. And when that rhythm is disrupted, it's a little bit more challenging for them to be the kind of impact player that they're accustomed to being. But I give Tatum a lot of credit for this game. I mean, he really did what his play matched his words. Tatum often says that, he's just going to play and take whatever the defense gives him. And this was a game where they said, beat us with the pass. Let's see if you can do that. Let's see if your teammates can make shots. And they did. And, for this Philadelphia team, I never felt adjusted to the rhythm that Tatum was clearly in as a playmaker. And so that's, Tatum puts you in a pick your poison kind of scenario. And the Sixers team just don't have the talent to hold their own with the Celtics at this point. And the guys that they are counting on to do that just aren't getting it done. And I'm talking about Joel and Paul specifically.
Yeah, the Paul things, it's startling. He had a decent start to this game, but the 2-point game before the break, some of the threes he missed in the second half, it's scary what he looks like right now. And maybe it's age, maybe it's the injuries he's talked about. But he's been worse than Tobias Harris for that Philly team, which you would have never imagined when they made that move.
But you know what, Bobby? Here's the thing about Paul George, though, and it really should have been that moment where Daryl Morey just decided to get up and walk away from the table. We know Steve Ballmer is not one who hesitates to cut checks. If Steve Ballmer is balking at paying you, there's something about you that, frankly, I don't want. Because that's a man that does not hesitate when it comes to overpaying for things. Because he feels the talent is worth it. When he determined that Paul George was not worth a new deal, at least the kind of deal that Paul was looking for, he was out. He's like, we're done. And frankly, Paul, it was clear to most of us that things didn't work out in LA, not just because Paul didn't get the big contract. They were putting up pretty clear signs that they wanted to be rid of him altogether, that it really wasn't so much driven by money. They just didn't think he could help them as much as he had been in the past. And they look pretty smart for making that decision because he has been brutal in Philly. I mean, you look at his body of work in the NBA, this might be one of, if not the worst season that we've seen from Paul George.
Definitely. You look at the numbers too. He was a 20-point per game guy for a while there, and now fallen into the teens. One of the worst statistical seasons of his career, and the efficiency, the big thing that's fallen way off. You could at least put threes up at volume with LA out there and hit a lot of them, playing off the other guys that they had, and that's not an option for them. And again, they haven't played much together, Embiid and he and Maxey, but even when they have, it hasn't clicked this year. And maybe with more health or some adjustments in the next year, that changes. But I'm not counting on it right now. And again, you look at the record there, could fall in the 12th place in the East tonight. So they're going in the wrong direction right now. 6 straight losses, I believe. There's nothing to feel good about there. Maybe the role guys. Like, I feel like they've gotten good role player performances through this year, and Maxey's been great when he's been available. But the two guys, George and Embiid, just haven't cut it this year. And you give Embiid that extension, you hope he's going to be there, and it goes the other way to start this year.
That deal looks so bad. That deal that may go down as one of the worst extensions we've seen in a long, long time.
You know who else looks bad, Sherrod? Nick Nurse, man. Every time I see him, he looks so stressed. He doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know what to do. I even asked him at one point, I'm like, what do you do with a team like this? Like, are you doing all right? Are you okay?
Yeah. Do you need a hug, coach? Do you need a hug, coach?
There's nothing you can do when guys are flying in and out of the lineup like this. And they're one of a few teams that have had seasons like that. And, it's amazing, Sherrod, that pick you mentioned earlier. The deal that sent it out to Oklahoma City, the Al Horford salary.
Horford, baby. And that's, and again, not to talk too much about the podcast, but that was one of the things I talked with Keith Pompey about how the Celtics have had their imprint on the Sixers' demise in so many ways. When you look at the Jayson Tatum situation, when you look at, they took Ben Simmons where they could have, in theory, taken this guy named Jaylen Brown, who went 2 spots
Markelle Fultz.
Right. And then as you pointed out, Bobby, the pick that seems they could potentially lose this year if they don't really start getting into the tanking mode could go to Oklahoma City. You talk about the rich getting richer. If they wind up with like the number 7 pick in this year's draft with the talent that they already have and all the kabillion draft picks that Sam Presti has already accumulated. And for Philly, it's like that. You can't. It's like adding insult to injury if they wind up with like the 7th worst record and have to convey that pick over to OKC, which is very real.
Yeah, and we talk about it all the time. It's not the full story, but Philly could have had Brown if they wanted to take him over Simmons. It was never going to happen, but they were in that position. It's not 100% true, but if they were higher on Tatum, the Celtics don't do that trade to move back and take him at 3. So I think, at least from everything we've heard, the Celtics were always going to take Tatum, even if they didn't trade back. But when Philly traded up, you could have maybe gone Tatum there. Again, I don't think the Celtics would have traded back, at least from the story we're told there, if they were all in on Tatum. But they're right there, too, as were the Lakers, who ended up going with Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball. at that time. So
Mm-hmm.
all three of those teams connected in some way, and the Celtics ended up getting Brown and Tatum out of it, who were both pretty amazing here tonight. But before we talk about them a little more, we do have to talk about Pritchard, who 15 threes, made 8 of them, 10 of 18 from the field, 4 assists, no turnover, or 1 turnover. He was perfect tonight, and they needed it when he came into the game. It was like a 2-point game through like 15-13. He comes in, hit 3 threes in short order, 5 in his first 8 minutes of action, and then he just kept hitting them for the rest of the night. And he was moving the ball well too, just like everyone was tonight, as you mentioned, Sherrod. And he just gave them some good lineup flexibility. And there were stretches going into the break where it felt like he was less involved, felt like he was shooting less. He talked about it a little bit in Miami, how just, the team getting healthy again and the way the game goes, there'll be nights where he doesn't shoot as much. Tonight wasn't one of those nights. And every time you see him have the 20, 25, 28-point games, this was his third 28-point game of the season, you're reminded that this extra element to this team that they didn't have last year, and it's him being a top 3 scorer on this roster who can just go crazy on any given night.
Yeah, and just the way that they're able to utilize him more times than not puts him in a position where he can do what he does best, which is knock down shots. When he's on the floor, he puts a lot of stress on your defense in ways that teams are, I think, now starting to get better at adjusting to. But when he's on the floor and you've got Tatum and or Brown playing along with him, it makes it very difficult to give him the kind of attention that you'd want to. And the Celtics know this, and that's one of the reasons why they have been able to play the way they have, take as many threes as they want, and have Payton Pritchard be one of the more impactful players. They have a very good system that they're running now. Payton is a really important part in that system, and to his credit, he's making the most of these opportunities. People forget that, the Celtics got rid of the 6th man of the year. The Celtics got rid of defensive player of the year in order to, in part, create more space for Payton Pritchard. And yes, there were some other pieces that obviously the Celtics got that were big deals, but by taking those 2 players out of the mix, Payton Pritchard now had an opportunity to play more, and I give him a lot of credit. He's made the most of his opportunity to play. This is a guy that, people I think have just kind of glossed over the fact that this dude wanted to be traded. And he did not mince his words about that. There was no miscommunication. There was no misunderstanding. He either played me or trade me, was just kind of where he was at. And to his credit, he's backed up that talk with great play. He said that he'd be better if he had an opportunity to play more, and he has done that and then some. So, again, kudos to Payton Pritchard for betting on himself to be more of an impact player when there really wasn't a ton of sample evidence that would give you a clear indication that he would be as impactful as he has been this season. So give him a lot of credit for just, again, having that confidence in himself to just put it out there and just be bold and be brave and be a player that's making a difference for this team now.
Yeah, so sure of himself too. When you have the downturn in shots, when you have the downturn in minutes, Noah's mentioned it that Porzingis' return probably impacted him in an underrated way, just by knocking him one spot further in the rotation, in the shot hierarchy. This was great tonight because you saw a good balance and a fully healthy effort for them. Between all their players, Tatum at 13, Brown 13, 11 shots for Porzingis. He's obviously going to get his. Holiday, has his usual 6 there. White with 10. Pritchard 18, probably a little more than he would have on the average night. But that's going to distribute between the bench some way or another when Brown and Tatum have to sacrifice a little bit. So I love the balance tonight offensively. The movement, you love that. A lot of it's just going to be how teams guard them. If teams do switch and just try to play one-on-one, it's going to be more of the Tatum and Brown show. But tonight, when those guys are seeing crowds, they're going to give it up. Other guys are going to get shots, and they have to knock them down, and tonight they did.
Facts. And that's how it has to be with these guys. They have to recognize, embrace, and take advantage of the opportunities to just put teams away and just really give themselves an opportunity to almost have like a little low-key load management type situation where you put the team away early, give your guys like Tatum and Brown a chance to rest. And it's really the smart play for them. One, if you're able to get those big leads, it means that you're doing a lot of things right, which is you want to build those habits going into the playoffs. And 2, You don't necessarily need to sit Tatum and Brown games, but if you can blow teams out and position yourself to where they can get the fourth quarter off, or they can get a significant portion of the fourth quarter off, it's going to make you a better team. Because you're gonna get guys out there playing who normally wouldn't play, and you never know when you'll need them in the playoffs. And it'll give your core guys like Tatum and Brown an opportunity to just relax a little bit and just enjoy the labors of the work they put in when they are able to blow teams out and not have to play in the fourth or much in the fourth.
Noah looks like she's talking to Al Horford in the locker room right now in his, per usual, much anticipated return to Philly. Didn't sound like it was a great crowd there tonight, Sherrod, according to her and others. And I noticed that when I was there earlier this month.
It's been like
they've
that.
They've given up on that team.
Yeah, they are. I mean, and that's not unusual for Philly fans. It's not unusual for most NBA fans.
They're focused on the Eagles.
As they should be. As they should be. As they should be.
Why not? Yeah, and they started booing in that first half. In the second half, one of their writers, Adam Harrison out there, was like, there's no reason to even boo at this point. Like, they just don't care enough to boo at this point. It's been that bad for that team. And it's just a number of teams, Sherrod, I'll text our group chat from time to time and just be like, what would we even say if we covered that team? What would we be saying if we did the Sixers post-game show? And I don't even know what we'd be saying at this point. We'd just be so damn frustrated. I mean, we went through it in 2021. You know, the Celtics had their time of frustration, but this is another level where you just don't even know showing up to the game who's going to play, who's going to be available. And that just has to be demoralizing for a team, Sherrod.
Yeah, it is. It's because, and the thing about it, you not only do you not have an end in sight, you don't have hope in sight. At least if you knew that you were this bad and that and guys were shut down, then it's clear you're shutting it down for the season. You're looking ahead to the draft. You want to get as high a pick as possible. They're in this weird space where they're sort of kind of playing as if they want to make the postseason, but then they're sort of kind of not playing that way. And so at some point they need to just get on the same page and decide whether they're going to just gather in the troops and just look towards the next season in the draft this year, or are they going to figure out a way to be more competitive? Because I just don't see the upside at this point for them doing anything other than just mailing it in for the rest of the season, looking ahead to the draft, and start rebuilding.
Yeah, I said we wouldn't talk too much about Philly, but it's
hard not to. But Bobby, they are that car on the side of the road with flames coming from the hood. No matter how much you tell yourself, I'm just going to drive by because that has nothing to do with me. You know damn well you're going to slow down. You know damn well you're going to watch, and you're probably going to be talking about it. Philly is that off the side of the road dumpster fire that we have no choice but to talk about because they're impossible to ignore how crappy they are.
So if they ended up playing the Celtics round one, which is feasible if they could turn around here, it's going to take a lot of work. They're running out of time. They're running out of games. It wouldn't concern you at all as a first round opponent?
Nope. Something would have to change from what I've seen thus far from them. For Joel Embiid, actually has to show he can play 35 minutes and not be out for the next game. Paul George has to actually look like Paul George from 2018 or 2019, not a 20-year veteran. I mean, he looks horrible out there. And Maxey is doing everything he can. Maxey, to me, I have no issues with Maxey in his play. He didn't have a great game tonight, but he was pretty good. And that's where he's at. I mean, he's a pretty good player who can be great on many nights, but he's going to need help, and he's not getting it. He's just not getting it.
2 seconds left in New York. I just flipped over to that game. They are tied with the Bulls right now. And looking at the standings as they head to Boston on Sunday, they could fall 3.5 games back of the Celtics if they lose here. And it is Bulls ball right now. So we'll keep you updated on what happens with the Bulls there. It could go to overtime. No OG Anunoby tonight. He's nearing a return from his injury. He didn't play in that last Celtics-Knicks game. And Mitchell Robinson could make his season debut soon. So we'll talk about that Celtics-Knicks game coming up on Sunday in a little bit. It's going to be an interesting one. Celtics have rolled through the Knicks twice in fairly uncompetitive games, even though that looked like maybe the biggest threat in the East. And we can talk about who the biggest threat in the East is going to be. once we get beyond this game a little bit here, Sherrod. But one interesting element to the Sixers that we haven't hit on here tonight because he didn't play.
Right.
I wanted your thoughts on Lonnie Walker and the Philadelphia.
I love it for Lonnie because he's going to get an opportunity there. And to me, Lonnie Walker is an example of the Sixers, I think, starting to put the pieces in place to build towards next season. Nothing Lonnie does, I think in part why it's a 2-year deal. And there's I think it's a team option for the second year. And for them, this is a chance to, frankly, have Lonnie Walker audition for 20, 25 games. And make a decision on whether you like what you see to bring him back for another year where he'll be in a contract year. So I like the idea of having Lonnie Walker, but again, if you're making up your mind, if you're Philly, that you're just going to basically mail it in for the rest of the season, I'm not sure Lonnie Walker is going to go along with that. I think he's going to put up numbers if he gets a chance to get out there and play, because he will certainly have an opportunity to knock shots down, especially, with Paul George struggling and them not having a clear I think scoring threat at that wing position. Maxey's, to me, I don't look at Maxey as a wing. I look at him as a guard. So I like that. I like it for Philly. I like it for Lonnie, but I like it more for them next year because I just don't think Lonnie's going to be able to do anything to make any kind of significant contribution to reversing the direction that this team is heading in right now.
Yeah, unless they shut some guys down like we've talked about and go to the bench, go to some of their younger guys, and he ends up playing more minutes to prove himself going into next year. And it will be a crowded backcourt going into next year. This could be a deal more oriented toward him trying to make it onto that roster and show that he can be in line with some of those guys, because you have Jared McCain next year. You have a bunch of different guards, Maxey and others there who are probably going to play in front of him on the average night. But his big thing was just getting back to the league after garnering little to no interest from teams across the league. And the Celtics, as much as they gave him a shot, as much as they looked at him and saw some positive stuff from him in the preseason, never seemed super interested in keeping him around for money reasons. But this is now, I'd say, like a $700,000, $800,000 deal to bring him over. All things considered, given it's a prorated deal for 28 games or whatever's left in the season. So it wouldn't have been that expensive for the Celtics to bring him over or back if they wanted to. Obviously, they saw Torrey Craig, who can blame them, given what he showed in garbage time tonight with the 3 blocks and his awesome debut last week. They went with Craig over Walker, and it's hard to argue with that because Craig's a bigger player. Craig's more of a defensive player, a guy who can knock down, catch and shoot threes rather than having to play on the ball a little bit. With Walker, and I know the fans loved him. I know a lot of people got captivated him at the time. You wouldn't have had the minutes for him. You wouldn't have had the shots, certainly. And defensively, I know there's some admirable traits for him on that end, but it's just never been his game, defense. And they want guys out on the floor who can survive defensively, Sherrod, and that's Torrey Craig.
Yeah. I mean, he the more I think he's around this team, the more we get to see him play day in, day out. I think the more people are going to like the potential that he brings to this team, particularly when you're talking about making a deep playoff run. The Celtics, like I said, they are really kind of building up their brand, so to speak, to have a deep playoff run. I mean, you look at just the way they have began, coming out of the break and just looking very much like the Celtics we saw from a year ago that steamrolled over everyone en route to Banner 18.
Will Lonnie do anything that makes Celtics fans go, oh, maybe we should have kept him?
No, and he won't, because he'll be doing it on a team that's still losing. And then the Celtics, meanwhile, will still be winning. So it makes it a little bit easier to stomach him playing well for him, knowing that he's in a situation where even if he puts up numbers, you're still left kind of wondering, what does that really mean? Because he's putting up numbers and his team is really bad. And if he doesn't put up numbers, is he not as good as we thought he was? So there's just no scenario that's going to really, I think, make him look significantly better than people's opinions of him right now are.
Taking a look at Noa out there. Looks like she's still in the locker room, so we'll try to hear from her. I mean, she shot down at 3 o'clock, Sherrod, for the 7 o'clock game on
Yikes.
a budget
Yikes.
on a budget airline, and I think she's going to be shooting back to Boston tonight too. So she had a busy day. So we won't hear too much from her here tonight, but there's a massive homestand coming up, so we'll have a ton of games in Boston starting Sunday against the next 8 of the next 10 in Boston, aside from Toronto and Detroit, back to back next week. So Celtics going to be getting a ton of time in TD Garden, and that could either be a good thing or a bad thing, Sherrod, given the way that they've played there this year.
Yeah, and that's the one of just the many puzzling aspects of the Celtics team is they the things that make sense for them to be really good at and benefit from don't necessarily work that way. And the places and spaces where there should be challenged and it should have a tough go at things, they beat the crap out of squads in those places. So hard to make what's going to happen, once things shift a little bit. But at some point, the Celtics really do have to start putting their imprint on playing well at home, because you don't want to have to win on the road. We know they can do it. They've shown they can do it. They're one of the best road teams at doing it, but you're just making it harder for yourself if you don't take care of business at home. And that's the last thing they need to do as they try to repeat.
Yeah, and like we've talked about, can they make the second half less frustrating, fewer letdowns, fewer bad losses at home against teams that you should be beating there, taking care of business overall at home? I want to see all that stuff here. I want to see a serious effort on display, a serious focus on display night in and night out down the stretch here. And I think the schedule is as such. I think the amount of home games that they're going to have coming up here give them an opportunity to do that. They have 10 losses at home. That's more than the Cavs, more than the Pacers, more than the Bucks, and the same amount as the Knicks and Magic when you look at the East. It's also more than the Thunder, Grizzlies, Nuggets, Rockets. Lakers only have 7 losses at home. Clippers have 10 losses at home as well. So they're like 9th or 10th when it comes to home record in the league right now, which is a far cry from where they were last year when they only lost like 4 at home all year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a problem. I mean, it's a definite problem, and there's no rhyme or reason as to why it is. I mean,
and no one can make any sense of it. Here's my best guess, Sherrod. I think the crowd, and I don't usually like to talk about the crowd, but the crowd's just been a little less engaged. I think that there's a heightened expectation for this team, just like we have on the air here, where it's going to take a lot to wow the crowd after a championship. So unless they're up by 10 or 20 or just running away with a game, everyone's going to be going, what the hell in the crowd? Or there just won't be a super engaged and passionate fan base as well, because of the massive ticket prices after a finals run as well. So it's just a different kind of fan, different kind of fan in the stands night in and night out right now. So I don't think the atmosphere at home has been super conducive to them dominating there, really owning that home court. And obviously it's on them. They're playing the game. It's not about the fans. But I don't know if you've noticed that this year. It's definitely stood out to me. And in fact, on the road where they've been amazing, they're actually getting some fans from different places, people who probably can't see games regularly. I'm sure Philadelphia was inundated with Celtics fans again here tonight. So you're actually getting home-esque crowds on the road more often than not, unless you're in like Oklahoma City or New York or something like that, where it's going to be predominantly home fans. So they play a lot more home games than just the TD Garden games, which is, I think, an explanation for their record in some part.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. The bottom line is that the Celtics just have to really continue to build on the consistency that we're seeing now as they inch closer and closer and closer to the playoffs. And a lot of that, again, is just created muscle memory moments where they're just doing the same things over and over again and embrace the mundane. They have to continue to grind. They have to continue to just find ways to win, but win with a certain amount of consistency in the process of how they do it. The team that we're seeing now is a very enjoyable one to watch. Because
I had a lot of fun tonight.
Yeah, I mean, they're getting it done at both ends of the floor, and they're not relying on one specific aspect, of the game to be successful. Like, yes, they made a ton of threes. There's no doubt about that. But they also made a ton of assists that set up those threes. As much as the shot making was impressive, the playmaking, I thought, overall was far better than we normally see from them. And frankly, one of the better playmaking type games that we've seen from them this season.
Yeah, and I don't want to be annoyed, Sherrod. I don't want to be the bad guy. I
But
don't
you're
want
about to
complain
be
about
that
this
guy, aren't
team.
you, Bobby?
No, on a night like tonight, how could you? And this is why John isn't on the show tonight, because these kind of games he wants nothing to do with. He wants to criticize and tear apart their bad performances. And there's not much you can say when they come out and shoot 44% from three and just drub their opponent. I want these nights. I want them taking care of business. I want them being the team that they can be. I want Tatum being in that MVP conversation. I want all that stuff. And when that doesn't happen, when they lose to the Kings or they take a 5-second violation and lose to the Hawks or start throwing the ball all around in crunch time, I don't enjoy that, but I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to criticize them for it. And they had a bad month in January. And as we get to the end of February here, I like what they look like. I think we're seeing a serious team that's playing and stringing together games that look a lot more like last year's team. And it's not just them shooting hot. It's the way they're moving the ball. It's the way that they're playing with pace. Even the defense, which still doesn't wow me or blow me away this year. That last Philly game that closed it with the 26-point comeback or whatever it was, it did. But they're playing commensurate defense in a game like this and doing what they need to do. The double big is helping too. And I think that's worth mentioning, that when they have all their bigs back now and Kornet's able to play with Porzingis a little bit and Porzingis Horford, all that, they've been really good at protecting the rim, which Jack Simone pointed out in one of his videos on Twitter this week. So good stuff from the lineup flexibility standpoint here too. But the big thing, Sherrod, like you said, is that they're just stringing game after game after game together here. When you look back at their recent stretch here, took care of business going into the break. That Spurs game was a professional win. That Heat game was a professional win. Statement win in New York, their first time going there this year. And then a statement win in Cleveland, obviously, on the other side of what was a really bad loss to the Mavericks, but ended up just being a one-off among a lot of really good games since that Houston loss a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, they definitely figured it out of how to just rekindle that magic mojo they had a year ago. So it's been good to see. It's been, because you feel now when you watch them play that they're playing closer to their full potential, which is so important, particularly when you're trying to do something that is extremely difficult, like winning a second straight NBA title.
We'll hear from Noah shortly here, and I'm looking forward to or I'm not looking forward to, rather, talking about the bad news of the day, which really just crushed me when I saw it. Wembanyama out for the year, and his last game ended up being the Boston visit on Wednesday. He was out at All-Star Weekend, Sherrod. Ton of press attention, of course. France pulling up in droves to talk to him, the media, the French media, and really basketball media in general, of course, captivated by his participation in the skills challenge as well as in the tournament. And, modest stuff from him out there. I thought a fairly modest performance in that Boston game that I still wrote about that night because it's just so fun to watch him. So fun to see how he matches up with the Celtics and Tatum, of course, too. Like, is he going to be shooting for Tatum's spot in the league as he gets older here? And then the Porzingis thing I found cool, too, because they had similar entries in the league in many ways. The hype around them, their size, their games. And Porzingis that night was like, he's just an even higher level than me, which I thought was telling, because Porzingis was amazing coming into the league. It was a revelation. And for this guy to be
a unicorn.
Levels above. Yeah, it's the unicorn and the alien, as they call it here. And so builds on the hype. It's so hard, Sherrod, with the hype he had to meet it. He exceeded it, and then he took it to another level into year two. And it looked like they were going to be on a playoff trajectory with the Aaron Fox in the mix here. And so you have that game against the Celtics, and it's like, okay, Celtics rolled in that game. They were all over him. Just an uncharacteristic night for him. And after the game, I didn't talk to him, but I ended up hearing the audio. And there really wasn't, he's a quiet guy, but there really wasn't a lot of energy from him. Like, he was very short, just seemed very tired. He even got asked in that post game, like, are you looking forward to going to All-Star, or could you use a break? And he was like, I could use a break, to be honest. And, it's been a tiring first half. And then in the All-Star game, again, modest performance, all the press availabilities. I listened in on them a little bit, and it was just very short-winded stuff. And I was like, like, I know he's a quiet guy, but this is even like short for him, especially on an event where people are coming in internationally and stuff to talk about him. A lot of attention on him. First All-Star game appearance. And so I guess, went back, got some tested for, exhaustion he was dealing with in some of these games, I guess. And sure enough, he was dealing with a blood clot, and he's going to have to get treatment for that. Blood thinners and all the rest, I'm sure. And he's going to miss the rest of the season here. And they're saying it's an isolated incident. I think Brandon Ingram went through the same thing early in his career, and he recovered and came back in full. Oscar Thompson had blood clotting last year as well, and he's been back and healthy this year and been able to resume his career. So there's plenty of precedent for being able to resume your career after this, fortunately. But this is a severe diagnosis here for a player who just had so much momentum and hope and hype around him this year. And there's obviously a strong case that he could be the face of the league after LeBron and Curry and some of these other guys move on, Sherrod. So to have, a career-altering condition like this right now is just awful news for himself, for the league, for everybody who loves him. Like, he's quickly become one of my top 5 favorite players to watch. And the fact that we're not going to see him at all now in this stretch run, obviously second to his health and him getting better and all of that, but just devastating for him, for basketball fans everywhere. And again, there's hope that he's going to return to start next season, according to the Spurs. But man, this is the last thing anyone wanted to see going into the second half.
Facts. It is. And again, he makes the game look so simple, so easy with just the things he's able to do. People often, look at him and say, if you were to go into a lab and create the perfect player, he'd look a lot like Victor as far as being long, lengthy, ability to defend, knock down threes, put the ball on the floor, score in a block. There's very little that he is not able to do at a really high level. And it's unfortunate that we won't get to see that. I was looking forward to seeing whether they can make a run together and get to the play game. That's could have been a very real possibility if not for this injury. He's just good, man. And I know it's like Doug. Oh yeah, he's really, really, really good to the point where he's one of those guys where a bad night for him statistically is an above average night for most players. You can see nights where he'll have 17 points, 10, 11 rebounds, 4 blocks, and that's pretty good for him. Those around him, it's the bottom line is this: he is going to be a great player, and this is a minor setback in what I still think is going to be one of the greatest careers that has ever been in NBA. There's never been anyone quite like him. I know there's some of the Porzingis comparisons, but he's a better player than Chris Apps.
And taller.
Right. I mean, when you listen to the way, it's not even so much anything he says or anything he does. It's what people say when he plays, what they say about his game. I mean, Chris Apps is a great example of that. I mean, Chris Apps is not used to looking up to anyone. Literally. That's not something that when you're 7'2" like him, you do. But he'll be the first to tell you that scoring on Wemby is hard, even for a guy that's 7'2" like he is.
He had to pull out all these moves and fakes just to get his shot off, and you don't usually see Porzingis do that. He's usually pretty direct.
No, I mean he had to empty the shed in order to deal with this damn tall 7'4" oak tree that was in front of him. I mean, I just remember when that was that one basket that he made on the paint where he spun on his pivot foot like 2 or 3 times, fadeaway shot went down. You would have thought that was the game-winning shot in Game 5 of the NBA Finals. He was super excited about that because that's what Wemby has done now. It's like a major accomplishment in your life. It's almost like a bucket list checked off if you can score on Wemby on the block. Just doesn't happen often.
Such a bummer to end this year. 46 games, 24 points a game, 11 rebounds per game, just short of 4 assists per game, as well as a steal and 3.8 blocks per game, which you don't see every day. 47% from the field and shooting 9 threes per game at 7'4". A lot of them off the dribble, many of them step backs. 35% from 3, which is what really put him over the edge in some monster performances this year, including how many points did he score on Christmas? 50?
50, I
or
think.
damn near 50, 42 with
Was it
18
for-
rebounds and 4 assists. He had a 50-point game against Washington in November, 42 against the Hawks in December. So 3 40-point games as well for him this season. Yeah, I had him creeping into that top 10 territory this year. That was one of my predictions going into this year. I had him at 7 by the end of the season, just looking ahead on what that list would look like by the end of the year. And unfortunately, again, just going to have to take a step back and deal with what's, a scary condition here in his shoulder, I believe is where the clot is. So no Wembanyama for the rest of the year, expected to be back at the start of next year. And of course, we're all hoping for the best for him. Again, we'll hear from Noah here after Jayson Tatum talks out in Philly. Ton of good games coming up to start the second half, and a great win for the Celtics here to begin the second half schedule here. Is there anything else that stood out from this game, Sherrod? Porzingis strong, I thought overall. Good stuff from Derek White per usual. I guess we can talk about Jrue coming back from the 4-game absence because you started to worry about him a little bit again. And he's one of the real questions going into the second half. Only had to play 19, 20 minutes tonight, which was good. Not a massive load offensively, not unusual, the low shot number here, but not a ton from him, and an overall solid return. I thought he did some good things, fouled Embiid at one point trying to guard him in the post, but they need him to be closer to the guy that we saw last year. And the repeated absences with shoulder soreness, as well as some knee soreness too, I think he's missed time with this year. And then he talked to Sports Illustrated a week or two ago, and Bobby Kravitsky over there, and mentioned a couple of times like a mental, aspect to this year, like making sure that the team's right mentally, making sure that, they get through this year mentally. So he dropped that line a couple of times in there in terms of the dynamic of trying to get through this regular season of the playoffs again. So obviously a lot going on with him, a lot of minutes over the summer and into the postseason. He's joked a bunch of times when we've asked about his health, like, yeah, I'm older. It's going to take me a little longer to get back to full health here. So are we looking at a guy who's been hurt a ton this year and there's real concerns about his health? Or are we looking at a guy who is just going about as easy as you possibly can through whatever bumps and bruises he's dealing with, because there's just not a ton to play for this regular season?
No, I think there's legitimate concerns about his health, because it would be one thing if they were shutting him down for load management, where he played back-to-backs or about to play back-to-back, and you're only going to play the first game, or you'll play the second game, or you'll play both games limited minutes. There's nothing like that. Well, he's missing games because he's hurt, and Jrue Holiday is one of those players that he could be what tips your repeat efforts over the top. We've seen it time and time again where Jrue Holiday will just absolutely completely dismantle, the top wing or perimeter scorer on the opposing team, and still get still get his as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Celtics move forward with Jrue Holiday, whether they'll be giving him some load management nights off, or whether they're just going to kind of just battle through whatever he's dealing with ailment-wise and continue to have him, a presence out there on the floor for you.
I'm glad we saw him tonight, because that's where we would have really sounded the alarm, is if that absence continued into the second half here. And again, no visible limitations from him, not a game outside the ordinary. It's just that he got so hot from 3 last year. He had such an out-of-this-world shooting season, especially from the corners, where he was like 60% from 3 to finish the year. That wasn't going to happen again. So can he get 38, 39 right now after this night? And again, a solid shooting night for him here. He's checking in at 34, 35. So, that's a real difference. And he's shooting more 3s than 2s at this point. The scoring's down just a little bit. The playmaking's down just a little bit. So it's one of the questions we're asking of, is this boredom, fatigue that we're looking at more this year? Are some guys just taking a small step back with the shooting, with their performances? And when you look at some of the older guys on the roster, even Horford, who was pretty good tonight, again, just a small step back from what was amazing years for some of those guys last year. And again, they're looking closer to that group right now than they are the January version of this team that really drew some concerns from myself and others. But you're still watching, especially the guys who are dealing with some stuff. And it's Holiday, but it's also Jaylen Brown, who we should talk about here as well, who trying to get into the second half, feeling good. I think, you saw him at the All-Star break. He's dealt with the shoulder, I think some lower body stuff as well. And he just hasn't had, and I think Noah's pointed this out, the same level of burst that he had last year athletically, especially getting downhill to the rim, especially finishing strong around the basket. And I think that's injury related. I think that's him dealing with some stuff in that first half. Now, he missed 2 games going into the break with, I believe, was a knee, and then played in the game, came off the bench. Decent performance there. I like that first game he had where he helped pull the OG team, as they were called, away from the Rising Stars. So there's some good stuff from him out there. I even just like being around him out there. He was in really good spirits this weekend, Sherrod. We can talk about that in a little bit with Noah, who wrote about that today over on SB Nation. So good stuff from him here. As I mentioned earlier, they switched the rotations again. He had been playing the full first quarter for a little while. He came out halfway through the first this year, and Tatum got that full first quarter, and then they went with the same rotation in the third, but he still got plenty of touches, still was efficient, and still overall had a good game moving the ball out of crowds and just continuing to keep this offense moving. And that's the key for him is, he'll have his aggressive moments where he's on the ball and he's trying to find his own shot and he's hitting difficult looks, but he's got to be in the flow of the offense a little bit here too, especially if you want to see Tatum on the ball and in control.
Yes, facts. What can we say? I mean, he's such an important factor in this team's success.
To that last point, I think he revealed at the All-Star game, Sherrod, 237 pounds, I think he said he is. Because
Damn.
One of the Australian reporters there came over and started asking him a bunch of questions and was like, "Oh, could you see the All-Star game in Australia?" He was like, "That's kind of far." And then he's like, "Oh, what do you think of Luka? They said he's 270 pounds. What's the most you've ever weighed?" And I think he said over the off season he was like 240, and now he's down to like 235, 237. So, yeah, even again, just everyone's always talking about the arms. He just got completely jacked this summer and last, and he's gone that muscular route. So if you're someone who believes that impacts your shooting, can maybe see that a little bit this year. But on the other hand, he's able to bang in the post, take on defensive matchups, and do the more brute strength things that this team needs, which is good because that's a contrast to the game Tatum's going to play.
Yeah, and you need to have that balance. I mean, you really do. And it's one of their strengths, the fact that, they don't have a lot of moments where they're just kind of stepping on one another's toes and just making things, making a bad situation worse. So they've got a good rhythm that I think works for them. Certainly it works for the Celtics.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Luke, Sherrod?
No, Bobby, but I know you do, so we will. We will. I have nothing
Good
against
stuff
Luke.
from him again here today. And what is it? It's the offensive rebounding, it's the passing and the ball movement, and it's the running. And you know who would love him, Sherrod, maybe even more than me, is, of course, Tommy Heinsohn, who loved nothing more than a big man who would run the floor. And early in this game, he just flew right ahead of Tatum, caught a nice pass up the seam, and just dunked ahead of everybody on the move. And then later caught another dunk in traffic there. And just strong, aggressive, all over the boards in this one. I think he had 4 offensive rebounds, and there were probably 2 more he could have had that just fell out of his hands. So he's continuing to stack together these impactful performances, Sherrod. And now you look at him, as a guy who has to play even into the playoffs. And I'm not going to go in the starting direction again, Sherrod. I'm not going to go there.
Thank you.
I think if you're going to predict, will Kornet be in the playoff rotation or will he not? It will depend on the night and the matchup, but I think you're leaning that he's going to play some amount of minutes in these games because they want to play big. They want to have that advantage. They want to be able to offensive rebound. And he's just been so great on the offensive boards this year.
Yeah, I mean, and he's getting better. I think that's the one thing about his game from where it was when he arrived here, from where it was at the start of training camp to where it is now. There's been a clear, undeniable growth happening with that. And so it's just really important that, again, that they continue to find ways to build on the success they've had, get more guys involved in terms of contributions to, more hands on deck, so to speak. And just keep building towards the playoffs, because ultimately, because as important as this win is, and so is the game on Sunday, it really is about stacking victories, getting to the playoffs, and making some noise.
Definitely. I'm not going to go too far with this one, but it was a lot of fun. Reggie Miller was going crazy. Kevin Harlan giving the Celtics some credit for developing Kornet. And again, you're just looking at him stringing games together right now. Going back to before the break, he had 2-4 against the Spurs, 14-12 in that next game. Less impactful game against the Heat. That wasn't his best night with 0 points there, but 7-5 against the Mavericks in that loss, 4-3 against the Cavs, 11 in the win over the Pelicans that Tatum had the game winner in. So a couple double-digit scoring games mixed in there, but overall he's playing 20 minutes in a lot of these games, at the very least 12, 13, 14, 15. So he is, going back to December 6th, that's the last time he didn't play in a game. And it's been 10, 11, 12, 20. He even has like 3 30-minute games mixed in there over the last 2-3 months. So he's in that rotation, Sherrod, and we'll see what it looks like come playoff time. But I have to predict that he's going to at least get a shot to start the postseason in this rotation, like he did last year before he faded away and then eventually got hurt.
Yeah, I mean, this team is just so ready to get past this damn regular season and get to the playoffs.
That's what they were saying on the broadcast too, Sherrod. They were like, this team just has so many options, so many guys, so many people doing things. And you look up and down their lineup, and it's so true. Your sixth man scoring 28 points. Your third center is dropping dunks in transition on 3 or 4 shooting. And then on top of it all, you go down the list of performers here in this game, and there's a lot of them. The 5 starters, the 3-4 guys off the bench. And then you get in the garbage time, and Torrey Craig, who feels like he's that next guy up right now. If someone's out, he's going to be the guy who steps in. He didn't play real minutes in this game, but came in for the final 8. He comes in and blocks 3 shots, grabs a couple of rebounds, doesn't shoot, but just looks fresh, explosive, impactful, and a guy who can defend. And I don't know if I 100% believe him, but right before the break, Sherrod, when he had a couple threes in that game in his debut against the Spurs, Joe was adamant that, it might take him some time to catch up here. It might be an acclimation period for him in terms of learning the language and all the things we do. But that doesn't really matter because we're going to play him anyway. We're going to take advantage of all the years of experience he has. And he is pretty well traveled and pretty experienced in terms of the NBA experiences he has at this point. And you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, Sherrod, because this is a buyout guy. And how many buyout guys have actually panned out over the years? It's not many. But for what this team needs, what are we talking about? A 10th man who can just step in and give you some solid minutes if you really need it in the right matchup, give you a little bit more lineup flexibility, and give you a guy who can knock down shots, which is most important and the kind of thing that Joe Mazzulla emphasizes above all else. I don't want to go too far with what his impact's going to be here in the second half, but what are you predicting on that sense?
I think he's going to be in that 7 through 9 spot where, depending on the matchup, he might be your 7th guy. But more times than not, if the plan is to play him, he won't be any more than your 9th man. And that's fine, because if you look at the 9th guy for most teams, Torrey Craig is better than most of those guys. And so the Celtics, it would absolutely be in their best interest to make the most of that more times than not.
And finally, joining us from Philadelphia, the blank screen of Noa Dalzell is all I can see. Oh, there she is.
How about now?
Looking good, Noah.
Wi-Fi. It's the classic Wi-Fi versus hotspot conundrum. And right now, I'm on the website. Good to see you guys.
Good luck with
How
that
you doing?
conundrum.
Doing well. We had a fun game. I arrived literally in time for tip-off because my flight was 6 hours delayed. Just in time
Six?
for a great Celtics 6 or 5. And I got here at 7, watched the game, and then we had a great post game. And I'm trying to send them through, but Tatum talked a bit about just like how he wants to be the greatest Celtic and chasing Larry Bird, and just it was a very profound post game. Would not get the lullabies in the background. So I'm trying to send it to you guys. I don't know if it's going to send, but
those are the
not
kind of
finding
things
it on the channel.
we talked about at All-Star, because Tatum was out there, Sherrod, and Noah and I both agreed we want to talk to Jalen. There's just so much more to talk about. It's just going to be better quotes. There's just more intrigue around him that
What is this?
has been great.
Well, I was also working on a Jalen story, which you should check out on aspirations.com. But yeah, I mean, Jalen's more likely to say something off script.
Yes,
Right,
so
because
most
Jalen
these-
doesn't step to those situations with a script. He's almost always
Right.
off script the minute he gets on the mic in front of him. Yeah.
So, and I love the dancing video he posted a couple times, but he when you get him going about Tatum, that is his legacy, stacking up with the greats, the guys he looked up to, that's where you actually do get some good stuff from Tatum. So what prompted it, Noah?
So Joe was pretty adamant post game that it's not anything new. He was like, this is how he's been playing. This has been him night in and night out. It's just now he's going to get the headline for it. So I think that was kind of the message from the team, is that it wasn't that he did anything particularly different. I mean, he attributed it to finding Luke in the seams, Pritchard hitting his shot. So more just like process oriented things. But I think that those of us that watch the team night in and night out have just acknowledged the fact that he is just comfortable not necessarily needing to shoot too much. He's like just loving the double team. You can tell that when he's dribbling at the top of the key, he's waiting for that second defender so that he can kick it out and get an open 3 for one of his teammates. And Joe said post game, like, this is one of those things that, you know, he now values that assist just as much as he values his own 3-pointer. He enjoys it just as much, makes him just as happy. And therefore, like, he's doing that and he's just making the right read. And I thought tonight was one of my favorite games that he's played this season. Even though the box score, it's 15 points, 10 rebounds, 11 rebounds, 10 assists. It's not like jumping at you, but it just from watching the game, this is a perfect example of why the box score watching is limited. Because I do think that he just controlled this game entirely. And then guys hit open shots. I mean, they shot well.
Yeah, the assist total in this game was pretty ridiculous for them. And that's not always there, Noah. We talked about this earlier. But when teams are going to show them crowds, when teams are going to double him, that's going to be the result. And the fact that they can flip on a dime to that, Sherrod, and now react to it so quickly and not turn the ball over and not have this period where they're like, oh, what are we looking at here? Not have this period where they're slowing down. And that's the biggest thing. I thought their biggest problem and their most underrated problem in January, Sherrod, is that they slowed down. I think they went down to 29th in pace at one point. And in this game, for them to have the shot total that they did and for them to be able to produce the quality shots that they did, you had to move. And whether it's those passes to Luke in transition or some of the transition threes that Tatum and others hit, they had some good pace to them today. And that put Embiid in a tough spot. And the 3-point shooting always does too. And they just put a ton of stress on that Philadelphia defense, Sherrod.
Yeah, and that's what you're supposed to do. I mean, you have one of the best offenses in the NBA, and you should be in position where you are putting your opponent in frankly, uncomfortable positions. And the Sixers never looked comfortable out there defensively against the Celtics. And then you certainly give the Celtics individual players credit for that. But to me, the bigger thing is just that was part of the game plan. Find a way to get the most efficient, effective offensive opportunities and make these guys pay. And they did that over and over and over again in this game. It was a 20-point margin at the end of the day, but it really felt like it should have been like 30-35, the way they just kind of dominated this.
And honestly, being there, it felt like they were up by 40 the entire game because there was absolutely zero energy from the Philadelphia crowd. And the Celtics, it just felt like Philadelphia never really had life. Like they went on a mini run in the fourth quarter to cut it from 29-19, but that was it. I mean, normally you play an NBA team that has multiple stars or, I don't know at this point exactly how they've been producing, but guys that are high caliber players, like you make that push, you have their back against the wall. Like they never really fought back. And there were a couple moments where like they left Pritchard wide open for three, like the third consecutive time, like literally wide open, like a pickup player would have probably hit that shot. And they were just continuing to make that lapse. And so there was an element of this game where I was kind of, as much as I was impressed with the Celtics, I was that unimpressed with Philadelphia. And I feel like during this last few months, I've had a lot of games where I've been really impressed by opposing teams, even if they've won or they've lost. But yeah, this was not one of those games.
You know what we got to do? No, I think it's time. We talked about the Sixers a ton earlier in the show. I think it's time to do our apology, Cam. We were wrong about the Philadelphia 76ers. I do not think they're going to make the playoffs. I do not think they're going to be a factor down the stretch here. I think they're done. And you know what? You looked at the talent going into the year. You looked at who George was in LA, and it wasn't right. And you never could have predicted Embiid's health this year. But you could have put it into the equation that he's not out there and available as often as some other stars or some other teams' best players in the East. No one could have seen it falling this far, but
you could have seen it.
They were never going to be the second best team in the East.
Yeah, I'm going to apologize because it was clearly a short-sighted take. And I think even like the Knicks would have been a better pick. The Cavs, I just didn't. I don't know. I looking back, like this league.
I like the Cavs. I didn't see this stuff.
I like them too, but I didn't have them in the top two. But I will say what I will say is I learned through this process that I'm not great at making league predictions. I'm good at making Celtics predictions. So since then, people have asked me to predict things. I'm not predicting. I'm only predicting Celtics related things. I'm not doing the whole standings game, who they're going to face. I don't know. My guess is as good as your guys' is. I only predict Celtics related things. I saw last year ESPN had the Minnesota Lynx, who made it to the finals, WNBA, in like their third worst team of the season. And then they ended up making it to the finals. So I think it's just too hard predicting league-wide trends. I'm quitting. I'm not doing it anymore.
So no blame.
And I'm sorry.
Wow.
No predictions.
Don't give up so quick, Noah. Don't give up so quick, Noah.
Really was a big ego hit for me. I was on a roll starting this job, saying that the 76ers were going to be the second seed, and just seeing them tonight, it really hurt me.
Yeah, I'm giving up. I gave up officially tonight, and I was already there a couple weeks ago starting to see who they are. And this is it. You're 55 games into this season. This is who you are. And they really haven't even been that good when they've been healthy either. And that was the case tonight. They just got completely run off the court. And maybe they'll be better next year, but it's not going to happen this year. They're about to fall behind the Nets, Noah. That really, when I saw that tonight, I was like, wow, it's over. So, yeah, that's the 76ers. Did you see Lonnie? Was he around?
I didn't see him, but again, I was late, so I didn't get a chance to explore the premises. But yeah, I didn't see him. I think he officially signs with them tomorrow.
Was he on their bench?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think he officially signs tomorrow.
I saw some of the Philly guys saying that he had the nameplate up in his locker room, but yeah, I don't think he was there.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah, I didn't get a chance. Chance to make it into the Philly locker room.
We narrowly missed the revenge game. Would this have been a different game if Lonnie played?
No.
Yeah, they lose by 17 instead of 20. There you go.
I think there's legitimately a feeling that I share that Lonnie Walker is a former Celtic who was like on a team and played games and things. And he was just here for preseason. And I feel like there was just like, I was viewing it as like former Celtic great
fans
Lonnie
fell
Walker.
in love with him.
I know. And
you
I was
fell in love
too.
with him a little bit too. You were
fan.
caught up in the hype train.
Yeah,
so you think he's going to do well there? I asked Sherrod, is he going to do anything that makes you say, oh, like, could that have happened in Boston?
No, I don't think so. honestly, can we talked about Torrey Craig's minutes? Like, I feel like he seems to be a seamless fit so far. I asked Al, I was like, he's fitting in perfectly. And 3 blocks in 8 minutes, the bench was going crazy.
So
like,
I was looking forward to talking garbage time with you. I think this is a win for you on the garbage time front, what we saw from Torrey Craig here today. I could see that translating to actual minutes in the near future here, as you said.
yeah, I mean, again, it's garbage time. I know we're going to take it as an asterisk, but the fact is that Joe values guys that are staying ready and able to check in and immediately make an impact. And he was able to do that today, checked in for the last 8 minutes of the game, wasn't in the rotation as they're fully healthy. And I think that's going to be the norm most nights, that if they have everybody, he's probably not going to get run. But to come in and to not, to immediately look ready to go. I mean, we've seen guys struggle a little bit in those moments this season. And he came in and was moving at full game speed from the second that he checked in. He no sense of like he's scaling up here. And then again, I mean, I haven't watched that much Torrey Craig film, but I was impressed with his athletic abilities around the rim. Like, I didn't realize that he was like, some of those blocks he got up so high, his timing was perfect. I was like, that's Derek White-esque kind of blocks. And I'm not saying he's Derek White, but it was pretty cool to see. And it was the most energetic the bench had been all night. Was like nobody could sit. People were going crazy the entire time, and he just kept them coming. So it was a small highlight of tonight's game. And I do think that he showed in that stretch as much as he could. I mean, you're not going to show that much in an 8-minute fourth quarter stretch, when you're up by 30, but he definitely showed that the things that appeal to the Celtic front office about him, that defensive intangible, that veteran experience, the readiness, all that.
In 2 games, we've seen him hit threes and defend. And those are the 2 things they need him to do. So really good stuff from him. I heard about him over on Celtics blog this week, and the theme is he's going to play. They're going to play him even though he doesn't have all the language right, and he's not caught up to the system and this and that. Like, they trust his experience. They trust things he's done in playoff situations he's been in. So he's the new O'Shea. Gary was giving me crap, Sherrod. He was like, "Oh, he stole your man's number. He stole your man's roster spot." And I was like, well, what can I do? I didn't.
He didn't steal, and it was there for the taking.
I'm wishing O'Shea the best. Pritchard, Noah, we talked about it. When the team's at full health, he's not going to get as many shots. He's not going to get as many opportunities. But they were at full health tonight, and he got a ton of shots and opportunities. So maybe it was just the way Philly guarded them. But it's good to see that he can play one step behind all the starters when they're healthy and still have a night like this. We've been waiting. When's that 20, 25, maybe even 28 point Pritchard going to be back? And here he was.
Ready to roll.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, his shot was on. He said post game, he feels like this is, there was no difference in his approach tonight where he was on versus San Antonio where he was off, but that he benefited from the break. And I think that Tatum was doing a great job finding him. Like, you got to give Tatum credit for the way he was seeing the floor, both him and Al. It was like he was seeing the play like multiple plays ahead. But I do think like Philadelphia guarded Pritchard like he was a guy who is just a 30% three-point shooter. I mean, they really didn't overreact to him, and that's the last thing I would want to do. Is I would hate to see, and we've seen this so many times this year when a guy, a team leaves Pritchard open, and next thing you know, he has 15 points like that because he can score in bunches. And now a 5-point game is a 20-point game. Like, if I was an opposing team coach, that'd be at the top of my list. Like, don't let that happen, because now you may have been playing them kind of evenly, and now single-handedly he just turned this into a blowout. And we've seen it so many times. So he has the ability to make that impact. And what I like the most is that he hit those 5 threes in the first half, but then he also wasn't forcing it. Like, he had some great driving kicks to Al for a 3, Tatum for a 3. So he's just playing within the system. And, I asked him if it's contagious when everybody's passing the ball that way. And he said, honestly, it's just like, it means more we're executing, like they're making the right reads and everything. But I think that tonight you could see that everybody was playing selflessly, and because the ball is falling, it's easier to do that. And he's one of the biggest beneficiaries when they're kind of playing this free-flowing offense. He's going to be the guy that benefits.
Yeah, and we've asked a million times, why would you double Tatum? Why would you crowd him? Why would you do this stuff when this is going to be the result? The answer is that there's just too much stuff to account for, especially when they're fully healthy like this. And they were saying it on the broadcast, Noah. They just have so many guys doing stuff for them. Like, you hold Tatum to 15 shots, you hold Brown to 13 shots, not remarkable scoring nights for either of those guys, or 13 each rather. You feel like you did your job at that point. Neither one of them went off from 3. Neither of them killed you overall. And then to just have Porzingis hitting 3 threes and White's 5 of 10 and Holiday's chipping in with a couple and Horford hits 3 off the bench. And then your sixth man is shooting 10 of 18 and 8 of 15 from 3. It's just too much stuff to account for. Because if they said we're going to take away everything else and we're just going to, put Yabusele on Tatum on switches, what's going to happen there too. So there's no good answer here, even though every time we look up and this happens, we're like, what the hell did they do that for? Because there's no great answer. Now, we can debate whether it's more effective to play Tatum one-on-one, make him take 1 million shots, make him take 1 million jump shots, and hope that he's inefficient. I think that's probably the way I would lean. But look at the games he had going into the break. I mean, he was on fire scoring the ball going into the break. So I'm sure Philly was like, let's get the ball out of his hands. And they did.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and that's how we know they're playing their championship level basketball. I think we're seeing them play. They really remind me of last year's Celtics right now. Like that feeling of there's a puzzle that has no solution. There's this feeling of, that what do you give up? We weren't feeling that way a month ago. And I think it's because the pieces are just working better. And the offensive execution today, that was one of my favorite offensive games they've played. Even when they got a little cold in the third, like never wavered from that process. But you're right. Like there's really nothing that an opposing team can live with when they're at their best. They can only really beat themselves. That's how I feel.
What else stood out to you tonight? Was there any other takeaways you had that we didn't talk about, or just anything else from the locker room or being there?
Yeah, just a couple of like locker room notes. It was funny. They were all watching the Four Nations, the hockey game. Al was doing his interview like right in front of the TV. Everybody was looking over him. They were all really into it. Derek's a big hockey fan. I didn't know that about him, but growing up, he was a big hockey fan. So, Celtics fans were very engaged, or the Celtics players were very engaged, and they were talking about just the fact that it was at TD Garden. I think was particularly cool to them. Good vibes post game. One of the most cheerful post game locker rooms, probably because they haven't seen each other in a while, so they have like things to talk about. But yeah, and the win.
Yeah, so Noah's heading back to Boston tonight. Good game. Again, I'm in agreement, Noah. I think we're going to see less nonsense, less frustrating moments from this team in the second half here, because it's not the second half. This is the stretch run that they're on. They're going to be at home a ton, though. I asked Sherrod this, Noah. Are we going to see the end of the home weirdness here, like all these losses at home and they're generally lackluster play that we've seen at home from them in the first half? Because they're going to be there a ton, 8 of the next 10 at home.
Yeah, I think that part of the home struggles was the fact that their home cadence was road trip, come back for one game, road trip, come back for one game. They're home for a consistent stretch now. Like home is going to be the norm for the next 5 weeks.
Well, after this game, they are actually going to be home and then away again this week.
I know this one, but in moving forward in general, I think that they need a little home stand. And I would be surprised if they went 2-5 on a homestand. Like I don't think we've seen anything to point to that. It's that level of overlooking those games coming back from the road, I think is the biggest thing. So I think they're clicking, they're playing well. Like I do buy into the road thing. I think they've been better on the road. It's not just a stats or a fluke. Like I think it's very legitimate. But I'd be surprised if they don't bounce back here with this opportunity to get some wins together. And I don't know if the 1 seed is within reach. It's ultimately going to come down to the Cavs. Like they're going to have to lose some games to create an opening here. But that's less important. What's important is that they're playing their best basketball coming into the spring. And I will say Al Horford and Payton Pritchard both were not asked the question and brought up wanting to win going back to back. Al literally brought it up on his own accord, I think. Where they both
Kornet again.
Nobody brought up Kornet. Kornet was not mentioned post game today. Nobody said his name
on this night. Why'd they bring him up on the night he had 0 points in Miami, but tonight no one?
That's what made it more profound. That's what made it more profound.
He was awesome again. The broadcast was going crazy about Kornet now, Reggie Miller especially. So another good night for Luke. How'd Holiday look to you before we end the show here? Because we mentioned that earlier too.
He looked good. I have to say, the Philadelphia seats, you're sitting baseline, so you have a much better view and you can hear everything. His defense is honestly I think it's even underrated sometimes. Just the way that there were so many moments where somebody was in the wrong spot and I just watched Holiday get there. And I can't see that when I'm watching it on TV as well, or even my normal seats at TD Garden. But tonight I could really see it. He was moving well. I think his shoulder, he said a shoot around today that he's feeling better. And I will say the first play of the game, Kelly Oubre hit him in that right shoulder so hard. Like, I don't know if you guys noticed that, but it was literally the first play of the game. And I was thinking to myself, like, that's literally the impingement that has been keeping him out. But he didn't look to the bench. He didn't seem to be grabbing it afterwards. So I think that it was somewhat of an injury, but also somewhat of like let's give this guy an extended rest heading into the break after he literally played all summer too.
Knicks up on Sunday, 1:00 game. I'm really looking forward to that, even though the first two games weren't too competitive. The second game was until Tatum ran away with it in the third quarter, Sherrod. We could see OG back. I think there's a chance, but probably a small one. It's Mitchell Robinson's debut. But all along I've said Mitchell Robinson's not good enough to totally transform this team's fortunes against the Celtics, and they have not looked like a good matchup against the Celtics. They did win tonight in overtime, so they'll stay 2.5 games back of the Celtics, but are they going to be able to compete in Boston on Sunday, Sherrod?
Compete, yes. Win, I don't think so. For them, it's to the point now where you gotta believe that pride's going to kick in and allow them to compete, unlike they've been able to up to this point. It's not like they've got a team of bad players. They have very talented players. They just haven't been able to galvanize themselves to be more than just a speed bump on the road back to the finals for the Celtics. So this is a big game for New York. They need to win this, not just from a standing standpoint, but just from a psychological one. The Celtics are living rent-free in their heads because whenever they play, the Celtics aren't even playing great basketball. They're playing good basketball, and yet they're still beating the snot out of these teams. That shouldn't happen. Philadelphia, they're going to have to be better. New York is going to have to be better in order to be competitive with these guys. So.
Thanks to Noah. She had a jump. She's going back to Boston tonight. Long journey down there today and turning right back around to Boston for the game on Sunday. So appreciate her. Again, she mentioned earlier, check out the Jaylen Brown story. A lot of good reporting there on his exchange program. We were both there at the event in Oakland, Sherrod, that he hosted, gave a speech, talked to us for a little bit there. I wrote about that a little bit last week as well, the event itself, but she's been reporting on that program in depth for a while, talking to Jason Kidd, who's involved. Jrue Holiday's involved as well in the exchange program that Brown's doing, which is basically just business development, business investment in Oakland. It was cool to see Oakland, Sherrod. I've never been to Oakland before, even though I've been to San Francisco 3 times. We actually stayed in Oakland thinking that there was going to be more going on at Oracle. There wasn't, but the 2 events they had there that we went to, the celebrity game and the all-star practice, it was rocking in there. And Chase Center in San Francisco was dead all weekend. So they probably should have recalibrated things a little bit in terms of what was in Oakland and what was in San Francisco.
Well, a lot of it comes down to just those 2 communities. You know, Oakland is much more, I think, cookie cutter-esque of what NBA engaged fans look like. Very exciting, very energetic.
A lot of jerseys. You got the hot dog stands outside. It was a whole different atmosphere.
Yeah, Chase is more, just kind of, the crust on my bread is chopped. I'm eating finger food. I've got, my favorite Chablis. People just want to have like a beer and some hot dogs and some candy. And just call it a day. It's a definite wine and cheese crowd at Chase, and over time, you lose some of that home court edge that you had before. Oracle, I can tell you right now, having been there dozens of times, is ridiculously loud when they are engaged, and some of the loudest crowds I've been to on the road have been in Oracle. One of the few
I was
places
blown away.
Yeah, it's one of the few arenas I've been to where the fans could get to a level in terms of their volume to where you cannot think clearly. Like you literally can feel the vibrations inside your head from them screaming and yelling and feet stomping and all that. It's a great atmosphere for a basketball game. And it's no surprise that the Chase Center is a bit more sedated because that's just how they built it. It's built for the people who pay lots of money for NBA seats, and most of those people are not your cookie cutter run-of-the-mill fans.
Yeah, did you have any thoughts about the weekend? I hate the conversation, but it obviously stunk. It obviously was lower rated in terms of the events. The dunk contest was good. And I think the city overall in the area, to loop in Oakland there, became a good host. I think the vibes
Yeah.
in the city, the events in the city, the weather certainly too was fantastic compared to Indy last year, which was a disaster weather was. It was good stuff, but they just can't get the game right. And I don't know if they're going to be able to.
I mean, they're running out of options to try and fix this thing. And they to me, there's the nuclear button, which is Team World versus Team USA.
I think that's coming up next after this hockey thing we're watching here.
Yeah, and I think that's going to move the needle, because if you're talking about the world team, I mean, basically you're talking about 5 of probably the top 7, top 8, top 9 players in the game. Jokic. You're talking about SGA. You're talking about Giannis, Antetokounmpo, Luka. Embiid if he's healthy. That's your 5 right there. So.
Could be interesting. I think that is an interesting format, but part of me is like, you're not going to get any momentum. You're not going to create any tradition if you just keep changing this thing every year. And what they did this year, even though I thought had some hope, did not work. No one wanted to see those rising stars. Taking a third of the All-Star games out of the action after one game was rough. And in the end, a 3-hour broadcast only showed 30 minutes of action. So I don't really care too much. Like, it is what it is. Maybe they should just make it normal again, play the East versus West and call it a day, because really it doesn't matter a ton in the grand scheme how good this thing is. But it's tough when it gets as bad as we've seen the last couple of years. And I do understand some of the complaints. So they'll keep tinkering, I'm sure. And again, I do think it'll probably be that U.S. World format next year in L.A. at the Intuit Dome.
Yes.
So maybe there'll be some fun with that location as well. Sherrod, Big 3 podcast. Make sure you subscribe. They just talked to Keith Pompey about the Sixers and where that season's gone. So if you want a little more Sixers demise talk, you can go check that out. Again, check out Noah's article as well as her podcast, You Got Boston. We'll be back on Sunday, 1:00 game against the Knicks from TD Garden. So I'll be down there as well as Noah. Will you be heading to that one, Sherrod?
TBT, to be determined.
All right. We'll see if we see Sherrod on Sunday as well. I'm sure Jimmy and John will be back for that one as well, an afternoon game. Jimmy's actually over at the hockey game, which I'm going to go catch the end of right now. So enjoy that, everybody. Thanks for joining us here tonight. Thanks to Noah again from Philly. And thanks to Ahmed on the production side. We will see you on Sunday. The second half is underway, and CLNS Media and the Garden Report have all the coverage here for you. Thanks for tuning in.
No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, John? We're going to do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to feel that way. Let's
Yeah.
fly out over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke an hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke